Music by DUDE.
Speak Black to Me. Speak Black to Me, a dynamic space of Black discourse where we engage in the process of elevating and transforming the mind. Speak Black to Me is a space where we come together to transform and transcend our given condition, to be and to become more powerful. Speak Black to Me. The liberated zone of intellect, of insight, and inspiration is called Speak Black to Me.
This is Dr. Kevin Washington, also known as Mwata Kairi. COVID-19 has ravaged the Black community. In areas where we make up only about 12% of the population, we see African Americans comprising of 70% of those that have either become ill or died from the disease. That is in Chicago and country. Well, if the volatile population, or African Americans and Hispanics, and the population that is engaged in the greatest amount of work, laborious work that is considered to be essential employees, then we can suggest that, yes, this is an act of genocide. Now, when there was a question about the disease and who was it striking, we were forced to shelter in place. Then when the shift came, all of a sudden, that the population that was most injured by this were Blacks and Hispanics, reopening the state became the moniker. Question. Why then? Why did the shift occur when it was suggested that this disease would be around for a while? First of all, we must understand what is a pandemic, an epidemic, and an outbreak. An outbreak is some particular anomaly that takes place that in a certain region that impacts the health and well-being of a population, some type of viral infection, a bacterial infection, some phenomena that comes along, and it's only in a certain region at one time. And an epidemic, something that impacts a larger swath of individuals across a country, typically. And a pandemic is something that reaches globally a variety of individuals, and it threatens their health, such as this virus called COVID-19. Now, as long as the discussion was about a Chinese disease, everything was cool because it was Hunan in China. And then when it began to matriculate across the waters, it became an issue of how do we begin to deal with this phenomena in the United States, and should it be dealt with? And then it became a disease that was simply ravaging, wreaking havoc on essential workers who are largely Black and brown people. Issue. Why are these individuals essential? When in reality, if they are essential now during a pandemic, were they not essential prior to the pandemic? And these individuals that are considered to be essential are of the lower paid population in this country, having to work long hours and receive a reduced amount of pay. But yet, they are essential. That which is essential is something that really deserves a great amount of attention. That which is essential is something that is critical to my existence. If they are indeed essential, then are they not worthy of being compensated for their essentiality? If they are essential, are they not worthy of proper attention to ensure that their health care is taken care of? Why are these same individuals that are essential are the most likely to die from the most preventable diseases. Why are African Americans largely dying from diabetes, hypertension, obesity? And all of these things are preventable. And in the same areas where you find a higher occurrence of these diseases, you also find COVID-19 wreaking havoc on that population. Why is it then in Iowa and other places where there are a large number of Hispanic workers, Latinx workers in meatpacking facilities, and yet they are deemed to be essential but not compensated, and they work large amount of hours in tight spaces, and they are being forced to go back to work because if they do not desire to go back to work, then they are demonstrating that they're lazy individuals. Stop. We just said that they work a long number of hours in very horrible conditions to bring home a minuscule amount of money. Why then would they be considered to be lazy when they are looking out for their health? Because they know that their health is essential to the life and the well-being of their families. Yes, the jobs are essential for money to come into the space called a home, and their health is essential to them going to work to be able to bring home that money. So if they are deceased, they cannot bring in that money, and thus the family suffers. And they're making a critical decision to not go into an environment where their livelihood may be threatened. To me, that is wise. It is of the greatest amount of importance for us to consider, what does it mean to be essential? How then can you suggest that you want to reopen America, reopen a community, reopen communities around the country, reopen states at a certain amount of capacity in these places? It doesn't make very good business sense if you open up a restaurant at 10, 12, 25% capacity. When a restaurant relies on the number of butts it can get into seats to be able to make money, most people know that the margin of profit for the food industry, restaurant industry, is very low. It's one of the reasons why the drinks in these places cost an absorption amount of money, because that is the greatest way they can make up for the loss that occurs in the context of selling food. So if you can't get butts in seats, you can't move products. If you can't move product, you can't make money. If you can't make money, then why are you reopening? Because in reality, it is about creating a margin of profit, or profitability, to be able to sustain oneself. A restaurant would lose money because it doesn't have butts in seats, because it cannot move product. Churches rely on butts in seats for tithes and offerings. Question: why, in part, are churches considered to be tax exempt? They're tax exempt because, in part, because they take care of the community. They take care of their community of concern. That means then that the government doesn't have to do a lot of things, because churches and other faith-based organizations are doing that work. And so, hey, it's worth to say that you're tax exempt because you're doing part of our work. If the government took care of the people that they consider to be essential, then it would shift the paradigm, and then even our faith-based organizations could do greater works. But they rely on butts and seats. Restaurants, butts and seats. Other institutions rely on butts and seats. Schools rely on children, students in seats in order to make ends meet. If there is a reduced capacity of individuals in these spaces, how then can one suggest that the margin of profit substantiates the desire to get back to work? That means then that this notion of getting back to work has nothing to do with reopening a country. It has more to do with the desire to push a population to the edge, a population into a space where the health of that population is greatly threatened. If we recognize that this COVID-19, novel coronavirus 19, because it was discovered or realized in 2019, it is not the 19th strand, it was discovered or revealed in 2019, and thus it is called coronavirus 19. If this desire to get back to work is truly about reopening America, and America is about making profits, then there is something amiss in this discourse that I'm not hearing. Because I'm seeing get back to work is at some level a form of genocide for populations that seem to be greatly at risk because of the impact of the coronavirus. Question: how do we justify the actions of reopening a country when it threatens the livelihood of those who are essential? If essentiality is the issue, then protection would be the act of the day. But if there's another agenda, then there would be a forcing of the population to be at harm's way to fulfill that agenda. It would not be the first time that a country would have engaged in the process of what some suggest is an act of genocide. When we consider looking at phenomena such as psychological testing in this country, you say that how does psychological testing equate to genocide? Well, the first group intelligence test in this country was called the Army Alpha and the Army Beta test, designed by a man named Yerkes. The Army Alpha test was designed for the literates. The Army Beta test was designed for the illiterates. And what was found is that the individuals who tended to score low on this IQ tests for the military were deemed to be infantry, or those who would go on the front lines to fight. And those who scored high were to be considered for officers in the Army. Largely, African Americans and others were deemed to be infantry. At the same time, the premise of the test was around this idea of the inferiority of Black people. Thus, the test found what it desired to find, and thus we had a large number of African American men being infantry men, that is, on the front lines being shot, murdered. The test was faulty, but the intent was to put these individuals in harm's way. Is that not an act of genocide? The first IQ test in this country before the grouped IQ test was designed by this man named Lewis Terman. And it was used in California as a part of the human betterment movement. And Lewis Terman's test was designed to discover to determine who was worthy of procreating and who was not. It was a part of a Galton conversation about eugenics or good stock out of England. And so Louis Terman used the work from two French examiners called Theodore Simon and Alfred Binet. And Binet said, I'll come to you to help you design this test. One guy said, look, you can't do this in the United States because you all are not like we are in France. We are monolithic and you have a variety of groups, so it's a different situation. You're more heterogeneous, and so there's an issue that you will not be able to capture because there are a variety of people. But Louis Terman said that this idea of intelligence or dullness was very common among the Spanish and the American Indian of the Southwest, and very, very common among the Negro. The test found that the Negro, the African American, the Hispanic, and the American Indian to be lower in intelligence than whites, or those from Europe. And thus, the sterilization process in this country utilized those tests to determine who should have children, who should not, and many states implemented sterilization acts based on this idea of IQ, which was faulty because it was based on a cultural construct of what it means to be intelligent, an act of genocide. Fannie Lou Hamer, out of Mississippi, who's known for saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, went into an hospital for some abdominal challenges and came out with a hysterectomy but did not know it until she got married and tried to have children. And she encountered what was called the Mississippi appendectomy. That is, hysterectomies that were performed on African American women throughout the South as an act of sterilization. Is that not genocide? Let's be clear. If a population is essential, then we recognize that it is to be protected. And if others don't see the value in it, we must see the value in ourselves and make critical decisions. If we are essential to the lifeblood of our people, our genealogy, our historical context out of which we have come, then we will value ourselves and make a critical decision as to how we will protect ourselves, because we know that we are essential to the perpetuity of a great people. Speak black to me.